Hello, friends. Welcome to the Disney Path. I'm your host, JJ. Let's go. Today we're talking about the Disneyland Monorail, the good old Mark 7 right there. Disney just announced that the monorail will be closing on March 30th, 2026 for a refurbishment. But because there is no reopening date established, or at least listed yet, and that'll take through April at least, that leads me to think about, is this really a refurbishment? Only a refurbishment? Or maybe something bigger? Maybe something that's part of DisneylandForward? Let me explain. So as we take a little time to talk about this kind of crazy theory I might have here, we're going to jump on the monorail here and take a little round trip around Disneyland. So much of the footage you're going to see as we take this trip was filmed as part of a very recently published POV for Disneyland Transportation. In fact, the first POV for Disneyland Transportation on the Disney Path, and of course it's the monorail. So if you'd like to just watch the monorail POV without any narration, click on this card right here. Otherwise, let's jump on and talk some more. The monorail has been operating since the very, very early days of Disneyland itself, all the way back to the late 50s. And today we all enjoy the Mark 7 here at Disneyland. The Mark 6 is actually in operation over at Disney World in Florida. But as we get going, let's hear that familiar sound when we get on the monorail.
Welcome aboard the Disneyland Monorail. For your safety, please remain seated, keeping your hands,
feet, arms, Mickey ears, churros, anything really that you got with you, keep it inside the monorail, folks, please. Now, Disney's been clear. The monorail is going to close on March 30th, 2026 for a refurbishment period. And what does that mean? Well, refurb means refurbishment. It means repairs. And we jumped ahead a little bit on our trek around the resort here on the monorail. We just came around the Matterhorn and we're pulling into the Tomorrowland area, and I'm going to stop the video right here. You can take a look at a piece of the track. Now, with the left side of the track zoomed in here, you can see where there's just some wear and tear on the concrete. This is what refurbishment is. It's you go in and make those repairs, and you do the things that allow you to keep the monorail up and running for as long as possible. And I'm sure there's a lot of other areas along the monorail track that will need some touch-up like this. So back to our ride around the park, and okay, it could be just rehab, but what if it's something else? And I'm going to get to that something else really shortly here. But first, let's talk a little bit about the monorail itself. The monorail did not open right when Disneyland opened. It opened a little later in 1959. It's got a top cruising speed of 30 miles an hour, and you can feel that when you're on the monorail, although there's several areas where it slows down a lot less than that, and 2 stops along the way, of course. It also takes 340,000 plus riders every year, which means that's about 900 riders every day. So the monorail's been an important part of Disneyland for a long, long time. Then as we're cruising right along Harbor Boulevard, let's take a look at the other models of the monorail that have been at Disneyland. Here's the Mark I as it appeared in 1959 at Disneyland. The Mark II making its way past its stop at the Disneyland Hotel. This is the first time a monorail crossed over a street in the United States. Next up at Disneyland came the Mark III with that distinctive bubble on top. Next came the Mark IV, but that's not part of the Disneyland fleet. That was the first monorail to be used at Disney World. The next version of the monorail at Disneyland again was the Mark V. Here it is next to the Matterhorn. And jumping back across the country to Disney World, here's the Mark VI. That's the monorail that's in use today. And finally, here's the Mark VII, our beautiful current monorail being used at Disneyland. And of course, as special events have come and gone, Disney has changed the paint and kind of graphic package on the side, which has made the monorail all the more spectacular. The Mark 7. Now maybe this really is just a refurbishment, just some repairs that need to be made, and Disney Operations really doesn't know how long it's going to take, but they do know that they're going to start those repairs on March 30. But what if it's something more? What if it's connected to Disneyland Forward? So let's have some fun with this. This is why you're watching this video, to hear a couple of crazy theories. Let's go. Now we just passed by where this train is in this concept picture of the Eastern Gate project as part of Disneyland Forward. So this concept art really doesn't show any major change in the monorail track as it exists today, because after it makes its way through the Tomorrowland area, it comes out again right on Harbor and makes its way toward DCA. So I don't think that we may not see a real big change in the monorail to accommodate for Disneyland Forward in this section. So let's speed up this part of the train here. As the monorail makes its way through Tomorrowland, parts of Fantasyland, and swings right back around into Tomorrowland to make its stop at the Tomorrowland station, it would be fairly difficult to make any kind of substantive changes to the track here. But there is another piece down the way where, yes, it could be a big part of Disneyland Forward. And as we get into the Tomorrowland station, we'll bring the speed back down to normal, looking at Autotopia here. And then pretty quickly here, we will be back on Harbor Boulevard. And maybe even at that higher speed rate, you could see there are a lot of little areas that can stand some refurbishment, some repainting, some, just standard maintenance that they don't always have the opportunity to do unless you completely shut down the monorail. But as we make our way back to Harbor Boulevard, we're gonna stop here in a second and look back at that concept art, because now we've made our way to this part of the track as we take the monorail towards DCA. So the Eastern Gate and the giant new parking structure that's going to be constructed just to the left side of this picture, those are two huge parts of Disneyland Forward. Now we're quickly coming up on where the monorail makes its right-hand turn back towards DCA. And just for fun, one more time, let's take another look at the concept art, because on the monorail, we are going right by this area on the real world track right now. Here it is, making that right-hand turn, and one day there will be that large walkover pedestrian path over where the monorail is. So if this closure has anything to do really with Disneyland Forward, or maybe some preparatory work for future work on the monorail for Disneyland Forward, I don't think it's part of the Disneyland part of the track. I think it's part of when it comes to an end through its small cruise through DCA. So let's look back at the concept art of the expansion of Disneyland and Disney's California Adventure over into the parking lot areas for what is right now parking for Downtown Disney. On our monorail ride, we are about to go through the part that cuts right through the Grand Californian Hotel. Let's take a look at that. Okay, we're coming up to the part that they built the hotel around the monorail track. You can see some of the courtyard areas and the rooms, and we are about to go through the second actual piece of the hotel that the monorail just cuts right through. And then off to our left is the vehicle entrance into the Grand Californian, but we're going to stop it right here because we've made it to the part of the monorail track right here on this concept art. So here's the crazy theory. What instead of this track going to the right, maybe they're making plans to curve this thing to the left, just like it does in this picture right here. This is an earlier part of the track that I think is a good illustration of how the Imagineers could adjust the track and make it veer off to the left. It can be done. It was done here. If the track is reconfigured to the left, then you could run the monorail all the way down into the expanded area of DCA and maybe the Villains Land over there. maybe along the back side of the Disneyland Hotel into the newer areas of the expansion for Disneyland, and then circle back to where the tram meets up back at downtown Disney. Of course, today the monorail makes its sweeping right-hand turn as it gets back over into the downtown Disney station. So after the monorail goes down for closure on March 30th, the Disney Path will be taking a closer look to see if they're doing any sort of activities that could lead to any of these wild, crazy theories coming true, or any kind of connection to Disneyland Forward in any way. Maybe it'll just be some surveying or taking a look at the monorail areas for some sort of planning for the future. Who knows? As we bring this video to a close, thanks so much for watching the video. If you learned something new or just had some fun watching, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. It really will help us out now and in the future. So until the next time, my friends, don't forget, be good to others, be good to yourself, and have fun on the Disney Path.